All right, let's talk about a legend, Billy Walters. In Las Vegas, that name is basically another word for winning. For more than 30 years, he was the guy the casinos just couldn't figure out, like a ghost in the machine. But here's the thing. His story doesn't really kick off with his biggest win. It starts with the biggest, most devastating loss of his entire life. Picture this. It's 2017. The single most successful sports bettor in American history, a man who had a winning streak that lasted 36 years, is sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. And it wasn't even for gambling. It was for something completely different. And get this, those were his own words right after the verdict. It just makes you wonder, right? How does a man who built an empire worth hundreds of millions by mastering the odds, by literally beating the system, end up losing a bet he couldn't see coming? To figure that out, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Yeah, to really understand the guy who broke Las Vegas, you have to understand the kid who was basically broken by poverty out in rural Kentucky. I mean, his rise to the top wasn't just unlikely. It was practically impossible. The way he grew up, wow, it's just staggering. We're not talking about being a little short on cash. We're talking about a house with no running water, no indoor toilet. His dad died when he was just a baby, and his mom, an alcoholic, just left him. He was raised by his grandmother, who had to work 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. That kind of scarcity, well, that's the kind of thing that lights a fire under you for life. And this kid's drive? It was off the charts from day one. At 7 years old, 7, he walks into a bank and gets a loan to start a business. Does it again at 9? By the time he's 19, he's the top used car salesman in Kentucky, pulling 80-hour weeks and making the equivalent of almost $500,000 a year today. He figured out really early on that if you want to win, you got to out-hustle everybody.
But here's the crazy part. For all that success in business, as a gambler, he was, and this is his word, a degenerate. By the time he's 22, he'd lost 50 grand. He even lost his entire house in a game of pitching pennies. He had the hustle down, but he was betting with his gut, and his gut was just plain wrong, over and over again.
So how does a guy like that turn it all around? Well, his transformation from a total loser at the tables to an absolute legend, it didn't happen overnight. It all started when he got connected with a crew in Vegas who were about to change the game forever. He falls in with this group that became known as the Computer Group. And look, this wasn't some backroom bookie operation. We're talking about guys like Michael Kent, a math genius whose day job was literally designing nuclear submarine technology. Yeah, you heard that right. They were the first to apply that level of serious, data-driven analysis to sports. This was truly the big bang for sports betting. Think about it. Everybody else is still scribbling on notepads, going with a gut feeling. These guys are using mainframe computers. They were actually leasing time from the government on weekends just to get enough power. They took betting from being an art form and turned it into a cold, hard science. So now, armed with this superpower, really, Billy Walters doesn't just start winning. He starts winning on a scale that absolutely terrified Las Vegas. And it kicked off a winning streak that would last for more than 3 decades. Now, here's the key to it all. A career win rate of 57%. You might hear that and think, that's not that amazing. But you have to understand, when you're betting millions of dollars, a consistent 57% edge isn't just a good strategy, it's a statistical certainty. It's basically a license to print money. And the scale we're talking about, it's just mind-blowing. Take Super Bowl XLI. He places one single bet on the New Orleans Saints and walks away with $3.5 million. See, this wasn't a hobby anymore. This was an industrial-scale operation. And then he did something absolutely brilliant. He took all this risky, high-variance gambling money and washed it into safe, boring, traditional businesses. He built a whole empire of car dealerships, golf courses, real estate, you name it. He secured a net worth of over $200 million. So what was the secret sauce? The Walters method? Well, it was like a 4-step dance. First, his team would create their own betting lines before they even looked at what the casinos were offering. Then, they'd hunt for mistakes, for discrepancies where their number was way different from the bookies. The bigger that difference, they called it the value edge, the bigger the bet they'd place. And finally, he had a massive network of anonymous runners place all the bets for him, so the casinos never knew it was him bleeding them dry. And that brings us right back to where we started, the big mystery.
A guy who builds his entire life on finding a mathematical edge, on never believing in a sure thing, he finally fell for the oldest trap in the book. He found an edge that wasn't just sharp, it was illegal.
So here's how it went down. He started getting inside information from a board member at a company called Dean Foods. They used burner phones like in the movies and had a code word, Dallas Cowboys, to talk about the company. And the irony is just glaring. For a guy who beat the system with super sophisticated math, this was an amateur hour crime. And it paid off. At first, he used the tips to make over $40 million.
And when the dust settled, man, it was a mess. Walters got 5 years in prison and had to pay tens of millions in fines. His source, Thomas Davis, flipped and cooperated with the feds. And then you've got the famous golfer, Phil Mickelson. He was named a relief defendant, made about $1 million off a tip from Walters, but all he had to do was pay it back. No charges. Walters felt completely betrayed, saying Mickelson could have cleared his name but just stayed quiet to save himself.
But the story doesn't end there. Nope, there's one final twist. On his very last day in the White House, President Donald Trump commuted Billy Walters' sentence. And just like that, he was a free man. So when you look back at all this, what do you even make of a guy like Billy Walters? People have called him the Michael Jordan of sports betting. But is that really the whole story? Because his legacy is really a tale of two completely different men, isn't it? On the one hand, you have this incredible philanthropist. Inspired by his own son, he raised over $50 million for a charity that helps people with intellectual disabilities. I mean, that's amazing. And on the other hand, you have a convicted felon. It really makes you wonder, was he a genius who completely revolutionized an industry using data and discipline? Or was he just a criminal who, at the end of the day, couldn't say no to an easy shortcut? Or maybe, and this is probably the most interesting answer, maybe he was both. I think I'll just leave you with this quote from the casino magnate Jack Binion. In the world that Billy Walters completely dominated, there is no debate about his status. He's the GOAT. His story is just this complex mix of poverty, hustle, genius, and crime. And it's a powerful reminder that sometimes the line between a calculated edge and an illegal one, well, that can be the biggest gamble of all.